What's going on, y'all? KM Best back at it again with your hot takes. Chavez should have been changed to give your charge minions +1 attack. I mean, she kind of was. ALIOTH was fine. ALIOTH is a way of life. Just adapt. So, I don't particularly think ALIOTH was fine, but I understand why someone with the username ALIOTH main might suggest this as a possibility. However, I do think ALIOTH's main issue was not so much its own power, which was substantial, but the way it influenced turn 6 in Marvel Snap, which is to say, when ALIOTH was a possibility, you often had to choose between playing around the card ALIOTH and playing around literally anything else. And I think generally that is a state of affairs that is okay to have for like a month, maybe 2 months, but I don't think that is what should be a defining interaction in your card game. And for that reason, I am fully in support of the ALIOTH nerf. It makes it a worse card generally, and it still, fills its role, but it is now a much more limited in scope card where you can be like, okay, if they ALIOTH here, I can play around it in multiple ways, right? Because you are only needing to invest a certain amount of power there now. I think that that is a good thing on the whole. The ability to make the counterplay to ALIOTH a little more face up as well, just have priority, is an important move towards making the game feel less like a coin flip of, oh, it's ALIOTH, I need to either play around ALIOTH or play around literally any other card. Reducing the incidence of occurrence for that, I think, is probably a good thing. Series drops should no longer occur, as Pool 3 is getting too large, preventing new players from attempting to build different archetypes. Parentheses, I did not get Wong, Mr. Negative, Venom, and others until after CL 3500, 4500. I think that's actually an interesting point. Not that your solution is good. To be clear, I think your solution is bad. But it is an interesting point that series drops do sort of expand Series 3. Like, for example, I, playing in the beta, completed Series 3 at around CL 2800, and now it can take up to like CL 4500. And I think that is something that has gone relatively unaddressed, in the sense that Series 3 continuing to get bigger makes you less and less likely to get these archetype enablers like Wong, like Mr. Negative, like Sarah, and it makes you sort of feel bad when you are unable to play decks because of that. It almost makes me wonder if the better thing to do is to put those archetype enablers in Series 4 and Series 5, but that is like an explicit paywalling of those archetypes rather than the alternative. So I think that's probably just sort of, not a thing you can do. So I do think you're right that there is something that should be changed about how those early pools tend to go. I wonder if maybe you could split Series 3 and put cards like Wong and Sarah and Mr. Negative into the early part of Series 3 explicitly. I wonder if that's a worthwhile design goal, because I kind of think that it is. The way the early pools are already so curated, right? Pool 1 and Pool 2, it's semi-random, and it's curated to give you a specific experience. And I actually think there probably is value in curating Pool 3 to give you a specific experience, like being able to experiment with Wong, Mr. Negative. Now, I do think that the reason that they have the free Series 3 card that you get once a month is so you can pick up those cards. But I do wonder if it might not be a more elegant solution to just put them in the early part of Series 3. Just make them always show up there. I don't think I would hate that in any real sense of the word, because it is interesting. You go from like Series 1 is like, 200 collection levels, Series 2 is like 400, and then Series 3 is like the rest of the game. And so it does sort of feel like you just get dumped into this ocean, this deep ocean that is very hard for you to get out of. So I think that's actually like a bad take on how to solve it, but good take on identifying an issue. Nothing that can be randomly acquired or rolled, i.e. spotlight caches, required album variants, daily shop, should be hand curated by second dinner. Set up a formula with some parameters like the daily shop resets and let the system work. I think this sounds good in theory for a certain type of player. And what I mean by that is there's a certain type of player that is going to use that and be like, all right, eventually this system is going to give me a really good box, right? Eventually this system will auto gen a spotlight cache that is absolutely phenomenal for me. But in practice, I do think they should be curated. And I think we've actually seen some cool things happen with the curation of spotlight caches, especially because of how if you don't curate them, you end up in situations where, there could be enormous gaps between when a card shows up in the box, which can already happen, but I think is a lot more likely to happen if they're all full random. And of course, the other thing that we get to see is like, we put cards that are good with or against the new card in the box with the new card. I think that's been pretty cool personally too. I don't necessarily think that the best thing for this is for them to just put it on rails and automate it and let it go. I do understand why you might want perhaps a more easily like I would say abusable system, right? Like you want a system that like some of the time you'll get a box that's just like Jeff Ironlight, it just absolutely rips. And they obviously will not ever let that happen as long as they're human created. So I do think there's some upside to it. I just don't think it's going to be like, I don't think it's going to be worth the effort for what is at best a side grade. SD's monetary branch makes even small whales feel stupid and unvalued. The album launch is a mess and isn't obtainable even by someone who may have a Jacinto Enchantress. I want to give SD my money, but I don't want to feel insulted in the process. I have always had this feeling about Marvel Snap, actually, which is you end up in these situations where you're like, why am I spending money? I could just get this for free. And I do think that there is a weird sort of value proposition where you're like almost encouraged not to spend money, but instead to wait. I think that's bad because when I played Magic before I got good at it, when I was just like a casual Magic player, one of the things I would do is I would like go look up a budget deck and then like I'm gonna go play that at Friday Night Magic, right? And I don't think there's any avenue for that kind of player in Marvel Snap. It just simply doesn't exist. You cannot be a guy who's like, I want to spend $100 and then go compete at the highest level available to me. You can't do it. It's not a thing. And too much of Marvel Snap is devoted to the collection and all this weird stuff ancillary to it. And I do wish there was just a way to be like, all right, I want to spend $100 on a competitive Marvel Snap deck. I would like to do that, please. And there is no way to do that. In terms of the albums, I feel like people are getting more mad at them than they deserve. It's like, oh no, the cosmetic rewards require you to buy stuff. It's like, dude, they're cosmetics in the first place. I haven't even looked at them, and I don't plan to, really. Like, is it a little bit iffy for Second Dinner to be like, here's these albums, they're gonna require new variants? Like, yeah, sure, maybe they could have not done that. Maybe it would have been better. But fundamentally, I just don't really think of this as a feature that is going to majorly impact my experience of Marvel Snap in any real way. It's just a feature that's there for the sake of being there, and like if you have the variants, here, go get some free stuff. It's not the fact that it's not like as free or as easy. It's like I don't, that doesn't impact me. I wasn't gonna get it anyway, right? I don't get variants I don't want to fill out like the getting of more rewards. That's not really how I play the game. And I feel as though it was never sold as like this amazing thing for free to play players or anything like that. And I don't really understand why everyone's mad about it. I think it's something that could very easily be better, sure, but in terms of problems with Marvel Snap, it just feels like this one is so down on the list. Frequent balance changes, regardless of being good or bad, are fundamentally at odds with the concept of getting invested in upgrading and splitting your favorite card, and this gets even worse when cards are totally reworked like Chavez was. That's actually true. That is a 100% true fact. Yeah, the fact that all these cards are up for change at any given time is an advantage that Marvel Snap has. It allows them to experiment with design. It's very, very good. The fact that part of the selling point is getting invested in a specific card, what it does, how it feels, and that can change at any time is, I think, a little bit bad, especially because part of what attracts us to a card is how good it is. And so I do think there is something to this idea that the game is a little bit at odds with itself in terms of wanting to create an experience where people can attach to and imprint on their favorite cards. But also, if those cards get too good, suddenly they might be a little bit worse, and then they won't be giving you the same experience because you were used to them being good. I do think that that is specifically like a hybrid, like it's a specific type of player that imprints on cards, but also only on good cards. So I will say that it's not like the most common problem to have, but I do think that that is something that is a fundamental minor contradiction in how the game is set up. Marvel Snap is the Smash Brothers of card games. It mostly targets a for fun audience, and the competitive community pushes it beyond the design intent. Isn't that like every game, right? Like when you say pushes beyond the design intent, that's not true. The game is designed to be played at a high level as well, but in any game, the majority of people playing it are going to be casual rather than competitive. That's just how having a popular game works. It needs to appeal to people that aren't just super sweaty. I I get where you're going with this, but I think it's overstated a little bit because, like, right now, you look at the Smash Brothers community, it is very much made up of, and that game still exists because of the sweats. And I don't think Marvel Snap is in a similar scenario. Like, Marvel Snap is a game that can appeal to both groups of people, and I don't think the sweats are pushing it beyond design intent for sure. That said, I do think this touches on what is a relevant issue, which is some cards are going to be balanced at a lower level of play that are not balanced at a higher level of play, and they do need to figure out what to do about that. I think Loki is a great example of a card that is like very, very much stronger at a high level of play than he is at a low level of play, and figuring out how to deal with situations like that should be something they are prioritizing. The way Snap balances has a long-term homogenizing effect. Think about the times Sandman, Leech, and Wave used to affect turn 6 in different ways, but all put 3 power on the board and usually played alone on turn 5. It took a rebuff to Sandman and a Wave rework to change this. I'm just not seeing it, dude. Like, you're talking about how balancing has a homogenizing effect, and then use an example of how balancing fixed the homogenizing effect. I don't really know where you're going with that one. I think if I'm going to try to steel man your argument here, what you're saying is balancing sort of tends to drag outliers down to a safe level, which is true, but I don't think that's necessarily homogenizing so much as it's like it's the only real way to avoid power creep is to take the ones that are at an unsafe level and pull them down a little bit. I think that's probably a good thing rather than a bad thing, and especially I think the argument that it homogenizes, the thing it homogenizes is power levels, not effects. There were 3 cards that did similar things on the final turn of the game, and they did all have 3 power, and now none of them do. They got dehomogenized via the system you're saying homogenizes them. The snap mechanic makes the game less fun, since you are not incentivized to finish the game if in a poor position, so even the winner kind of loses by not getting to see their fun combos and setup pay off. I think this one might actually be true. Like, I know. But I do wonder just how well Marvel Snap would do if it was just a card game. I think like the strength of the game is the gameplay, and the snap mechanic, while fun and interesting, is definitely like kind of stapled on almost. Like the gameplay in Marvel Snap is so good and so unique. And I do think that there is a sort of a situation where like traditional card game exciting moments are like someone with a very low chance playing to their outs. And in Marvel Snap, you're disincentivized to put yourself in a scenario where you have a very low chance and you're playing to your outs, right? Like when you think of exciting moments in Marvel Snap, you think of like Lambie's big comeback. But the only reason he was able to be in that position and make it exciting is because he always had to play to his outs. He had no choice but to play to his outs because he was out of cubes. And so when you are in a scenario where often instead of making the like low percentage potential win play, like you would do in a game like Magic, when you're just like, all right, well, I'm playing to win, so I'm going to make a low percentage play to win. In Snap, instead of making that low percentage play to win, you often end up retreating because that's a better long-term play. And it's not a coincidence that when I think of memorable snap moments, it's the ones where retreating is not an option. And I think that that is worth talking about, actually. Like, I do think that not having those ability to like see the scenario and try to outplay in a low percentage situation, I do think that is actually a potential issue with Marvel Snap as a, viewable esport. Of course, the major potential issue with Marvel Snap is a viewable esport is that we don't have a spectator client. All right, y'all. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted a hot take for this one. I think one of the through lines that I really noticed here was, wow, there are a lot of economy takes right now. I think normally there's a lot of balance takes that show up here, but most of these are about the economy, about the experience of playing Marvel Snap, and I think that's probably a bad sign. Like, I am a little bit apprehensive about that because I think that Marvel Snap should be about the game Marvel Snap, and instead, all people's hot takes are about the things around the game Marvel Snap. And that might just be because the actual game Marvel Snap is really fun and really awesome, which it is. And so there's not a lot to complain about the actual game. It's just the stuff around the game. And I think that is, I guess maybe it's a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. Because the core gameplay loop, I think basically everyone agrees. Even the people who are in this video is like, yeah, game is dope. But the stuff that surrounds it is, I think, the part that needs the most tweaking. And I think these hot takes really demonstrate that. So thank you so much. As always, I've been KM Best. You've been amazing. Remember, like and subscribe if you like this, and I will see you in the next one.